What is EB-5 redeployment and how does it work? First, let's take a look at the typical EB-5 investment process. The investors invest money and file a Form I-526 petition. They then receive USCIS approval and start their 2-year conditional permanent residence period. Before the end of the 2-year period, the investors file a Form I-829 petition. After that, they receive a permanent green card. Historically, the invested capital was repaid to investors in approximately 5 to 7 years. So both the green card and money were in hand by the end of the immigration process. The good old days. Why is there a need to redeploy EB-5 capital? Every year, the Department of Homeland Security allocates 10,000 visas to EB-5 investors. Each country of origin has a limit of 7% of the total, or 700 visas. Countries such as China and Vietnam, for example, have reached the annual visa country cap. So they started to face processing retrogression and long visa backlogs until the U.S. government passes regulations to add more visa numbers. But USCIS still requires that investors' EB-5 investments remain at risk during the entire conditional permanent residence period until their Form I-829 petition is filed. Because of the visa backlogs, the original EB-5 investment may be repaid to the regional center before EB-5 investors are eligible to file their Form I-829 petitions. As a result, USCIS has informed EB-5 investors that they must redeploy their funds into another investment to satisfy EB-5 program conditions. Who has to redeploy their funds? An EB-5 investor who has not filed the Form I-829 petition but whose investment capital has been repaid to the regional center. Let's take a look at 2 hypothetical scenarios. First, consider Mr. Singh, an EB-5 investor from Mauritius. His I-526 petition is approved in April 2017. Because there is no EB-5 visa backlog for Mauritian nationals, Mr. Singh promptly applies for and receives an EB-5 visa and begins his 2-year conditional permanent residence period in August 2017. Mr. Singh's 2-year conditional permanent residence will last until August 2019. Let's assume that Mr. Singh's investment is due to be repaid in November 2020. Because at the time the EB-5 investment is repaid, Mr. Singh will have already completed his 2-year conditional permanent residence, Mr. Singh will file his I-829, and 1 year later, he will be eligible to receive his capital back and will not have to redeploy. Now, let's consider a different scenario involving Mrs. Li, an EB-5 investor from China. Her I-526 petition is also approved in April 2017, but because Chinese nationals are subject to the EB-5 visa backlog, Mrs. Li will not be eligible to receive an EB-5 visa and start her 2-year conditional permanent residence period for more than 10 years. Let's assume that Mrs. Li invested in the same EB-5 project as Mr. Singh, which is due to be repaid in November 2020. Because Mrs. Li will not have begun her conditional residence period when her EB-5 investment repays, Mrs. Li's repaid capital will need to be redeployed into another investment, or she will risk not having satisfied the EB-5 requirement when she files her I-829. A good regional center should provide redeployment options that are USCIS compliant and protect investors' capital as much as possible. Be sure to watch Part 2 of our EB-5 redeployment series, where we explore different redeployment options in detail and compare their pros and cons. Thank you.